Yeah, so I'll just say the last thing before we shift to feed is just, again, fundamentals here is learn to use your hands to sense what the car is doing. It sounds obtuse and basic, but calibrate your own touch sensors in your hands to learn to be very sensitive.
Green flag.
Welcome to the Blind Apex Podcast, where amateur club racers tune in to get faster.
This episode is brought to you by DeechWorks Fuel Systems. Use Apex 10 at checkout to save on fueling your passion. I want to thank all the people who contribute on the Buy Me a Coffee, all the folks that comment, leave reviews, all that stuff. It really helps keep the podcast going. Yeah. So, all right. I was going to take this podcast high tech, and I reached out to my guest, and he was like, yeah, no, let's do something different. Let's do the polar opposite. So we're going to talk about analog driving skills. I think we're going to go force ourselves down a fundamentals route, but I'll let him define what we're really talking about. So speaking of my guest, I finally browbeat him into coming on the podcast. You can usually hear him coming on Garage Heroes in Training with Bill and Vicky. I get a little jealous. He drives a BMW, so he's not a Honda head. He drives it in GLTC, has a NASA ST5 national championship under his belt. He responds to DMs when he's even out jogging. So, he had to leave me a response. The namesake of Barbato Speed Factory, Nick, welcome to the podcast, sir.
Oh, God, thank you so much. It's an honor and a pleasure to be here. I do have to say, though, I've owned 2 Honda S2000s and won a bunch of national championships with them. So I'm a Honda boy at heart, my first love, if you will. But so, always mad love for the Hondas. But yes, current ride is the 1990s Beamer Saloons.
I find that most people were a Honda head at some point and then they matured. What does that say about us who are... I'm approaching 50 soon, and I still haven't got out of my... That's terrible. Why is my phone ringing? I'm almost 50. What does it say about me? I haven't got rid of my Honda yet.
No, I think it means you're in touch still with an important part of your, younger self. And look... I have mad love for the BMWs, but it doesn't mean I think that they're better than the Hondas. I mean, most every pro team that has ever modded a Beamer has converted it to front double wishbones. And I'm a very big advocate of the front double wishbone setup compared to the mixed drop. But, you can make it work. So, and lots of other really cool stuff about Honda that I hate to say it. I think Honda does better, but to each their own. Both fantastic platforms, and many platforms within each make to choose from.
Yeah, for sure, absolutely. I mean, at least they're not a Miata, right? So we could be one of those.
That's
sorry,
right. And yeah. And not to hit on the Miata boys, but I could say with a certain amount of joy, I've never owned a Miata and probably don't plan on it either. Not to say that those cars can't be cool, but I think I'm gonna steer clear of those for a while.
Yeah, I have a spare K24 laying around, and it tempts me to put into something rear-wheel drive. So, anyway,
S2000.
No, they're too expensive.
That's true. Ugh.
I can buy a blown-up NC Miata for $2,000.
I had S2000 CR, a 2008 Berlina Black, super clean, 38,000 miles, and I sold it to some guy in North Carolina for like $24,000 in 2014. Super clean, unmolested. Yeah.
If you would have waited 6 more years, you would have got double.
I know. A little bit of me dies every time I think about that. But it did go to a good home. The guy loved it. He actually was going to surprise his girlfriend, who was also a Honda enthusiast, for Valentine's Day. He actually bought it. he came and picked it up like the week before Valentine's Day in February. So yeah, it was like, it was gonna potentially snow and everything. So he was a real trooper. He wanted that thing bad.
Yeah. So, all right, let's get into this a little bit. Let's get your background. What is and how did Barbato Speed Factory come to be? And let's just talk. Let's talk about you getting to where you are now.
Yeah. So, I could probably give you an hour-long rant on this, but I'll try to give you the 1 to 2 minute version. So, just a young kid, humble background, never had the financial means to race. Went to college, started doing go-karting after watching my, childhood hero, Dale Earnhardt, and, the Michael Schumachers of the world do their thing. Always wanted to get into racing. So went to college, worked my way through college, did some go-karting, won some, local indoor championships, raced at on-track karting in Wallingford back in like the early 2000s. Actually, my brother and I did the decals on the outside of that place. That was cool. But yeah, I used to drive hours to go race up in Braintree, Massachusetts at F1 Boston, did some leagues at GPNY. Then I started doing autocross in 2008, won a bunch of pro solo national championships, and that started doing sim racing. I'm proud to say I was a 2012 Nissan GT Academy finalist. I did very well, was on the TV show that year, awesome experience. Started doing Lemons racing, NASA time trials, won a NASA time trial national championship in 2016 with my BMW. Actually got some opportunity to do some low-level pro racing and Curly World Challenge and SRO. I have poles and wins and podiums in that series. And then started doing club racing really on my own, let's say 2020, 21, and won NASA championship and a bunch of regionals and a bunch of lap records and everything. And so really just the culmination of that experience and my obsessive nature to understand what I'm doing and why. And, starting off getting my butt kicked from the local pros at the local go-kart track and watching what they were doing and trying to understand just from an analog perspective, no data, no average speed, min speed, peak G, just watching what were they doing with their hands and feet? What was the attitude of the cart and the car doing? Where were they placing their car? How are they managing the yaw of the car? Just all of the little just anal details that I, for most people and myself included, just took thousands of hours of practice to get, you could spend 500 hours before the next light bulb goes off, but then it becomes a lesson. And then it gets ingrained into your algorithm. And then all of a sudden you stop thinking about it and you start doing all the right things all the time. And then you can form a plan and verbalize it. And then, to where I'm at right now is I can watch what other people are doing in just a video, no data. Let's just keep it simple. Let's just watch what you're doing in the in-car video. And then let's start to improve. And the types of changes that you can do, both in terms of one lap pace and long run pace by, not overdriving the car, taking care of the tires. It's remarkable. And I get a tremendous amount of joy and pleasure from, helping guys, everything from, noobs up to pros, become the best versions of themselves on the way to trying to achieve mastery. And so it's really not an exaggeration to say I really have at this point, I could say I've dedicated my life to it. And when I see, the folks going out there and implementing the techniques and the things that I advise them to do and see the results, man, it feels so good. And it's almost like I'm out there with them competing. So I just love it. That's it.
So one, I'm glad that the only videos that are out there from my Garmin Catalyst in which you cannot see me, because you'd be like, what are you doing behind your veil?
I guess it's time to schedule a session then, Cobb.
Well, yeah, I have the Smarty Cam now. So yeah, there's more of me flailing about, you see my hands all over the place. And yeah, I've made mistakes, but okay, let's try. Oh no, I'm going to derail the podcast already. So hold on. I have to ask this question. Sure. So how do you compare the competition at the NASA ST5 groups that you raced in and the GLTC groups that you raced in?
So I've been asked that question more than once, and I'll give a little bit more complicated and nuanced answer than I think probably most people want to hear. So the best racers in ST5 are as good as the best racers in GLTC. With GLTC, you get a bit more of those guys at the top consistently running, and you get bigger fields. So to succeed in a competitive ST5 region like NASA Northeast has some of the best, in my opinion, has some of the best drivers in the whole United States competing in ST5. And of course, the fields can vary from weekend to weekend, but the competition is intense. It's ferocious. There's extremely committed guys there, and you have a rule set with ST5 that is more founded around parity. So, less open modification, more around parity. So it's no diss to GLTC, but I think, in my opinion, it's a bit more about the driver in ST5. You could win with no disadvantage in a S2000 and a BRZ and a BMW. There are other platforms in GLTC, which, if you know GLTC, that are more preferred than others. So it is in some ways more about the car. In GLTC, the rules are a bit more open. There are fantastic drivers in GLTC and ST5. I would put nothing between them. But you do get more folks interested nationally in GLTC, right? Because it's got a really cool live stream. There's a huge fan base. It's an opportunity to get sponsors, and to do some really cool stuff. I love hearing Mr. Kyle Hayer, in the background doing his awesome, live broadcasts. And, to me, I think for a guy, that doesn't have, an SRO budget to be able to go out there and compete at a high level against some absolute killers, in GLTC, it's cool. So, you're going to get probably a greater quantity of killer drivers in any given weekend at GLTC. But that's not to say ST5 has that same kind of talent, just less of them usually at the regional level.
Yeah, the rule book is thicker for ST5, sort of, but it's a built-in builder's class to GLTC. So there's definitely going to be creativity a la Coutil's Civic and all the stuff he's done to it, right? If you engineer all the cars similarly, then other cars will start to, I don't want to say be better, but maybe be more consistently competitive.
I agree.
There's a level of dedication people have to that class where, like Eric does, that makes it look unfair from the outside, but everyone else can do it too if they want to put in the work, not just the driving work, but the building work. So that's the interesting part for me.
Yeah. And,
okay.
And also too, right. There's constraints with time and budget, I love Eric Coutil. I know there's massive respect in both directions there. He has, he works just as hard as me or anyone else, but he also has a family and a team behind him, and he's been at this series for a long time. And if you heard my post-race comments after I won the second sprint at CMP, I said what I said before. That car is a work of art. It's clean. It's engineered with thoughtfulness, with experience. It's optimized for that power to weight ratio in that class. And it has a great rule set for that car, with the average tire width rule. That's a big deal, so you have a great driver, a master car, and a great rule set, which, makes that Civic frustrating to race at times.
For sure.
Yeah.
Okay. So let's get on topic a little bit.
Sure.
Let's define analog driving. Sorry. and what are we going to talk about today?
Yeah. So analog driving, as I would define it, is what you are doing with the inputs you have available to go as fast as possible around the racetrack, which of course is your hands and feet. It's your steering, throttle, and braking inputs, and how you utilize those inputs to manipulate the car to go as fast as possible around the racetrack. That's it. It's the fundamental principles of how you do all of that. On top of everything else, where you place the car, line, racecraft, etc. But all the stuff you can do that applies without the need to look at an aim data trace, without the need to open up your Harry's lap timer. It's just all fundamentals. No digital technology. All you use is your wonderful computer you have mounted right behind your skull, right inside your skull, and that's your brain. And I think I'll just say at the out front, I was thinking about what we were going to talk about tonight when I was going for my little evening walk, and in my opinion, right, you could have all the data, all the technology in the world behind you, but if you don't have the analog mastered, you are never going to become the maximum potential driver that you can be. If it will limit you. So it's worth focusing on to really become, to find that last 3-4 tenths, those magic tenths that, maybe you see one of your competitors doing, and you have all the same equipment, all the tools are available, but you can't just, you can't seem to figure out how that guy's going just a little bit faster. It's probably in the analog driving skills.
Okay. So where do we want to start? With the hands or the feet?
I think we could start with the hands, because I anticipated you asking me a question like, what is the, number one thing I see that I focus on right away with drivers that can be like the number one biggest thing that you can focus on today to go faster and to take care of the car. And the answer is, without a doubt, is using too much steering angle. Period. Full story. So what I often see is, and I think one reason why this is such an overlooked thing is because you can be extremely fast using too much steering angle. There is not much difference in grip. Not much. It's noticeable, but not much difference between, cranking in 16, 20 degrees, even more steering angle than what the tire will use. Most performance tires are only between 2 to 4 degrees. Some of the lower grip 200s are, maybe around 8, but you don't need much steering. You don't need much tire slip angle to get the optimal amount of grip out of a tire. But on most tires, not all, the grip won't fall off too much if you drive past that. And some tires can allow that more than others. But what I see often is, for those watching, imagine I'm grabbing a steering wheel right now and I'm turning the wheel and I'm at the 90-degree mark, but I'm going past the 90-degree mark. I'm almost going to like 135. Now, of course, it depends on the steering rack and how quick that is. But I've worked with drivers, for example, most recently, a very fast driver, and he had me go out in his car, and I was able to take the same corner even just a little bit quicker, literally using close to 45 degrees less steering angle. And I was right the limit of the front tire. The lap time was more or less similar, but that lap time that driver was using that too much steering angle, it quickly fell off. The car slowed down 1.5 seconds over the next 8 laps. So the one lap pace is similar, but you overheat the front tires.
Yeah. Okay. Let me check off the question that you answered for me, or ask of yourself. But yeah, so when you add, it's something I've cognizantly worked on. Okay. And I'm going to ask a question at the end. But one of the reasons my car stays consistent from lap 1 till 30, 40 minutes into the race is because I've cognizantly worked on how much angle I put in and how I remove it. Okay. So working with your hands consistently, but we'll get to I don't want to give my advice per se. I want to hear what your advice is. But
Sure.
I had to actually, and I'll ask, well, when I get to that question, I'll ask it. But I had to work on the suspension setup of my car to accept, and so it would react with less input. Some people's car is too pushy, right? And so they think more turning means they're going to turn more, but they need to loosen the car up a little bit so it takes that little input and has a larger reaction to it. And I think that's what is holding some people back. What do you think about that?
Yeah, and I'll add some things and elaborate on a couple of others. So from a driving standpoint, first we'll talk driving and then setup and how those are interrelated, as you said. So what I see in addition to too much steering angle is the reaction to the perception of understeer. What you said is a lot of folks will see the understeer, sense the understeer, and they crank in more angle. Of course, right? That is the complete wrong thing to do. It seems very counterintuitive. It's not, it's not steering enough. Let me turn more, right? That makes perfect sense until you understand the physics of the tire. And so we'll go back 2 minutes, right? You will lose a little bit of grip over driving the tire. You will gain grip back by unwinding the wheel. And so what I try to teach people is two things: is if I see that they're using too much steering angle, and we'll forget about the car setup for a second, all things equal here. So if I see people inputting too much initial steering angle, we'll just cut the steering angle in half. Literally, we'll say, here's the degree, here's your current input. I want you to do half max input this time. I want you to make that your number one driving note when you strap in and go out next time. And then when you sense the understeer, I want you to sense it and unwind the wheel. And it's going to feel uncomfortable. It's going to feel unnatural. But if you are confident you're on the limit, right through your spidey senses, through the audio feedback of the tires as they're talking to you, and that's another thing we'll talk about. If you establish you're on the limit through feel and audio cues, unwind the wheel if you are experiencing push and feel how much grip comes back. And then over time, you develop an algorithm to test, right? If then statement. If input is too great, dial back 2 degrees. And then you begin to refine this algorithm, each track, each lap, etc. As the tires go, as the track temp change, as the tires come up, go down, as the grip level changes, to where you want to be within plus or minus 0.5% of optimal right out of the box. And then you take care of those tires in the process. So that's number one. And then number two thing that I see is, you talked about setup and adapting the setup to your driving style, to what the car is doing. You talked about adjusting your car so that it would react more quickly to a given steering input. One thing I see is a lot of guys, if they are using too much angle, and if you're using too much angle, you're going to be driving the car into understeer consistently. And so you will actually need a looser setup. A guy that will tend to overdrive the car by using too much steering angle is actually unknowingly, with his driving, inducing more of a natural understeer balance, as the front tires are so far beyond the optimal slip angle relative to the rear. You will need to loosen up the car. And then, of course, that can cause more issues, right? As the tires change in a longer stint, varying conditions. Now you're fighting a loose car. You can experience the pushy loose condition, which often happens. Often people can't really tell, it's pushing, and then it's going loose. They might think I need to tighten up the car, right? That's wrong. So I encounter that a lot. You have to learn to recognize that, right? Because what pushy loose is you're understeering, then the tires come up and then they grip. And then it's the snap oversteer condition, because you go from a non-grip to grip situation, and then you're shocking the drivetrain. So going over all of that, and so to your point, if I answered your question correctly, it's two things, right? It's getting the inputs right, and then adjusting the setup on the car, not hopefully not to just acquiesce to your steering input, but to, once you correct your steering input, to adapt the balance of the car to that correct technique.
Okay. So I have some simple questions, but I think they need to be asked. Hand placement on the steering wheel, where are you wanting people to put them? Because I see it all over sometimes.
This is a ferocious argument that I see people have. I'm just going to give what I teach everybody, 3 and 9. And there's an ergonomics to that, which is you want to try to have, if you can, right? And I know with different cars, sometimes modified steering columns or lack of modified column, you can't get it optimal, but you want to try to have it so your elbows and your arms are at a roughly 90-degree angle, comfortable, and you want to be able to make an input comfortably just beyond the 135-degree mark. And I would encourage people to never take their hands off the wheel. I see people do shuffle steer. I am anti-shuffle steer. Now, of course, if you have a long rack and you can't get enough angle because you have a stock rack and whatever, all good, right? Then you should be shuffling. You should be shuffle steering. But on a car with a properly set up, a sufficiently short rack, you never shuffle steer, and you really want to never remove your hands from the wheel. Another thing I'll add while we're on this topic is another thing I talk about with students is using your dominant hand to push into the corner instead of your submissive or weak hand, your subordinate hand pulling into the corner. You will have actually more control if you turn from the outside and push in with the wheel and have less fatigue over a stint than if you are pulling the wheel with your inside subordinate hand. This is one of the things, it's almost one of the very first things I work on with students. And you will find your at limit precision and feel for optimal steering angle. And then 2, the response time with which you can correct the wheel will be better, will be faster if you start to teach yourself to turn in from above with the dominant outside hand.
Okay, that's interesting. I'm down. I know one point I have tendinitis in my hands. Too many days on motorcycles for me. Anyway, I hurt my hand. I was having a grip issue. Let's not talk about the shifting that was occurring, literal ham fisting. But I was driving mostly with my left hand, and it was the most exhausting thing I've ever done because I could not grip the wheel. At least not enough with my right hand. So it became very exhausting. But this is a big one for me, a lesson I had to teach my nephew on the sim. Do you wrap your thumbs on the steering wheel or not?
I don't consciously wrap or unwrap. I will maybe, let's say, halfway wrap underneath. So I run a 330 millimeter, touring car style circular wheel, and I will partially wrap. So thumbs will get just underneath grooves. I won't completely wrap with thumbs, but they're sort of like partially wrapped underneath. So let's say most of the turning is with palm and fingers with some support from the thumbs.
Okay. I do not wrap my thumbs at all, but I put the poor kid I turned it down to 5 Newton meters, the wheel, and he was hot lapping Summit Point. He was getting there. I mean, not on pace, but not wrecking and stuff. And he tried a full send through turn 3 and he wrecked, but he held onto the wheel while he wrecked, thumbs wrapped. And he weighs nothing. Like my forearm's bigger than his whole body, and I thought it was going to spin him in the chair. So I was like, "Don't wrap your thumbs," and he was like, "Okay, lesson learned." So
sim racing can be a dangerous sport. I've been there. It's funny. I talk about so some guys will help. They're doing sim racing and stuff, and obviously for realism, you want to crank up the force. For maximum speed, it's usually very low force, of course, just for maximum response, basically just enough to try to get some feedback, and that's it. But yeah, I've I've been there. You go off and hit the wall, and you're forgetting. This is just like real life. You should take your hands off the wheel, or else you're gonna get some kickback. And yeah, I've tweaked my wrist more than once in the sim rig. So hopefully, I've learned my lesson.
So, what else do we need to do with our hands? And maybe do we switch to our feet, or are we done? Is there anything we need to do shifting wise? Or let's try to expand and see what we've got.
Yeah, so I'll just say the last thing before we shift to feet is just, again, fundamentals here is learn to use your hands to sense what the car is doing. It sounds obtuse and basic, but calibrate your own touch sensors in your hands to learn to be very sensitive to what the tires are telling you. And there's a sim trick we touched on before, which is, as I was, learning to go through all the pain and suffering to learn how to get fast enough to qualify for Nissan GT Academy back in 2012, which was like a 1.5 year long process, I'm not ashamed to say, and taught a lot of the basic fundamentals that I'm talking about with you right now. I actually would say that going through the process of that pain and suffering set the tone for the rest of my racing, air quotes, career. And learning to sense what the tires are doing with your hands is one of the, I think, biggest skills you can develop, because what you need to use that for is for every tire, right? Every tire is a little bit different, whether it's, a RE71R or a Maxxis RC1 or, a Kumo B730 or a Hoosier R7, R8 or, a Falcon RT660. It's feeling what the tire wants. Every tire is going to have a little bit different window and a little bit different range of slip, and it's going to communicate and vibrate and give an audible noise. Try to feel what that optimal vibration is. Once you figure it out, once you sense it, and try to just commit that to memory and how that felt with your hands, and then try to keep it at that operating window. Whatever that is to you, whatever you perceive, try to catalog that. And then every lap after that, try to target that sensation. Just note it, literally write it down, and shoot for that, and train your hands to feel that in a way you can literally articulate and write down whatever words you want to use to describe it. If it's a high pitched sound, if it's a buzz, if it feels like sandpaper to you, if it feels like you're dragging a tennis ball across tarmac, whatever that is to you, commit that to memory and then connect that to the optimal steering angle with which you achieve that. So that's the last thing I'll say about hands before we go to feet. Any questions or comments on that?
I do, because some people would say we're the wrong wheel drive people. So in a front wheel drive car,
you're the anti-driver.
What you feel in your hands isn't just from the input you're giving with your hands, but what your feet are doing also translates, especially into the steering wheel. So in some ways, it might be easier to drive a front wheel drive because we don't care what the back is doing. It's going to follow, right? In theory. But we have a lot of management of the front, so with our feet and our hands. So
well, you know what, I'll actually come to the defense of the front wheel drivers. I'm proud to say I spent lots of time in front wheel drivers. I ran a front wheel drive, Lemons crap can Volkswagen Fox, and then Mark III Golf for a long time. And there are unique challenges, very difficult challenges that you encounter with a front wheel drive car, because you're trying to do your turning, most of your braking, and your acceleration all from one set of one axle, one set of tires, right? So actually, I would actually say in some ways it's more challenging because you have less tools at your disposal to manipulate what the car is doing. It's an even more challenging tire temperature challenge, right? You often have to set up a car to be, not always, but often set up a car that's front wheel drive to kind of be almost undrivably loose until the tires come up to temperature. That's another challenge. And then managing the tires, especially over a longer endurance stint, managing what the front tires are doing. It's even more critical in a front wheel drive car compared to a rear wheel drive car. So in many ways, it can actually be even more challenging. You're probably often a little bit, it's maybe easier to recover from big angle, massive mistakes, because you can just sort of turn into the slide and hit the throttle and save it from disaster. But yeah, I would say it's just as difficult to go fast in a front wheel drive car at the limit, at the 10/10 peaky limit compared to rear wheel drive. So mad respect for all the front wheel drivers out there.
So let's talk about our feet and what are we doing wrong with our feet usually?
The biggest mistake that I see drivers making with their feet is not mastering pedal pressure under braking. And this is probably, I know you've had guys like Ross Bentley on the show, and the mastery of the pedal pressure under braking is the last bit of time that's going to turn you into a master and separate you as, the best from the rest. I see a lot of guys using too much pressure right at the hit. So there's initial pressure and then maximum pressure. I see guys, we the topic of this podcast is going analog. I see too many guys using too much digital input on off pedal and relying on the electronics of the car to save them. I would encourage anyone, if you haven't done it, to do, pay your buddy who runs in Lemons or Champ Car or whatever to spend a weekend driving a non-ABS car, and you are going to learn very quickly how to get to the limit of braking. And that should be your fundamental skill set as you transition back into an ABS car. And then the second thing, of course, is learning to blend your inputs. Almost every car on planet Earth, in most corners, not all corners, most corners, is going to benefit from some amount of trail brake, some amount of transition from straight line brake into, as you turn in, we've probably all seen imagine your hands are connected to your feet with the string, and as you turn right, you're going to lift up off the brake, transition. It's that blending of inputs from some amount into some corner, depends on the corner, and some amount into the corner depending on the car wheel that you drive, right? A mid-engine rear-wheel drive car is going to require less trail braking to take the correct maximum speed through the corner. Front-wheel drive is going to be a different challenge as well. But you want to learn to master the trail braking blend into the corner, and you induce the yaw. You decide when the yaw moment is going to begin and at what rate in the corner, not you reacting to the car getting loose as you transition abruptly off the brake and then into the steering input and then fighting a yaw with counter steer. That is the wrong way to do it. You can be extremely fast doing that. But the guy that's going to beat you on the data, not to talk data here, but you can, we can see it in the video, is if you can keep the car more composed, initiate your own controlled yaw through the entry phase of the corner by trail braking and keeping the front end loaded but not overloaded through the entry of the corner. That's going to buy you that, 0.02, 0.03 in this corner, 0.0203 in this corner, etc. Not multiplied, with the added benefit of, if you get your car rotated at your discretion earlier in the corner, there will be another fraction of a second at which you can then get on the throttle earlier because you have rotated earlier and positioned the car for the earliest throttle application possible, which again then is a foot input, and it's not a digital on-off. It's a progressive feed-in as fast as humanly possible while unwinding the wheel. So just to recap, it's straight line brake, transition off the brake smoothly while beginning your steering input. Depending on the corner, there will be some amount of maintenance throttle or slight brake trail off. And then the moment you begin to enter throttle, you begin to unwind the wheel. And the fastest laps are the least dramatic. They look boring. There's no corrections or very minor corrections. The fastest laps are the least dramatic.
So there was I've been doing this too long. Back in the day, you used to see guys, and even in circle track, I still see it in their videos. You see them sawing at the wheel. From the time they turn in to the time they exit a corner, they're just left and right and probably a little more whatever the corner direction they're traveling, but they're always going left and right. And I'm like, there's no way they're micro correcting that many times in a corner. And I've asked a couple of people and they're like, oh, we're just trying to find the limit. And I'm like, that's not how I would do it, because your rack is taking that input and moving them side to side as they're laterally loaded. I was like, even on an HPDE day, you're just killing those tires. You're murdering those things. I don't know. What's your take on people who saw at the wheel a lot?
So I'll give some caveats to this.
Okay.
Where might you want to saw at the wheel? You might want to saw at the wheel if you're racing at your relatively low grip circle track, dirt track, and you're sliding the back end around in a slip angle because you're in a slurry and you need to be using a car that is at 25 degrees to the racetrack because you're cutting through dirt, and that's what gives you the maximum amount of cornering speed through the corner. So that's a caveat. But I will say in most we'll call it grip driving, as some of the kiddos used to start using that terminology 10 or 15 years ago as drifting started to get more popular. With grip driving, the opposite is true. Now, that doesn't mean that you're going to probably consistently overstep the limit a little bit, which will require a minor correction. But the rule is, not the exception. The rule is, if you have your car set up optimally for the track, your tires are in the window, your setup is on point, and your driving inputs are correct and timed properly, it will be minimal input at entry, middle of the corner, and exit. Will there be some counter steer? Yes, especially if you're taking risks, inducing the yaw with aggressive trail brake. Yes, it's just a correction, just a little correction, and that will typically occur multiple times throughout the lap. But that will sometimes be so minor that it might be imperceptible to another driver watching. Yes, it generally speaking, if you are sawing at the wheel all the time, you are doing something wrong. Either your fundamental technique is off, or the setup on your car is off. You're fighting some condition, and that might very well be the case. I've been in the car where something happens. Maybe a shock blows, or the sway bar end link is disconnected, and so you're getting this like variable rate of roll stiffness on off. A spring has collapsed. There's a ball joint or a bushing that's messed up. There's a bent wheel because the guy earlier in the day went off and smacked a curb, and now you have like a nonstop vibration, and at the limit, that corner of the car is just like literally oscillating in and out of grip, right? There's any number of factors where that could be the case, and then you'll have to use more input more consistently. But that's the exception. The rule is the fastest laps look the least dramatic. For whoever's watching, pick your favorite F1 driver if you're an F1 fan. Whether it's Schumacher or Hamilton or Verstappen or Fernando Alonso or whatever, and watch their primo qualifying laps. They're on the limit. They're ferocious. They're taking risks, but they're generally non-dramatic. It's no mistakes. It's minimal input, just so. And that applies to all sorts of grip driving, whether you're an ST5 or GLTC or, any of the other awesome racing classes all over the country.
Yeah, I just see it a lot, and I'm like, what are we doing here? It drives me crazy a little bit. So let's talk about rev matching or heel towing. Is it required?
Oof. Yeah. This is another hotly contested topic. So I've heard pros talk about, hey, I've tested it on the data, on a modern ABS car. You're wasting time. It's better to leave the car in gear and just do all your braking, not heel toe, and then do a little shift at the end. And perhaps there's merit to that. And I think I could, just thinking about it as an engineer, I didn't say I have a couple degrees, computer science and engineering. So I'm definitely not anti-data, anti-digital. I did object-oriented programming in C++ in the early 2000s. I love technology. Now in the aerospace industry, a mechanical engineering background. Okay, so I say this with all those caveats. But, first of all, I just lost my train of thought. What was the question?
So rev matching or heel towing.
Okay. Yeah. All right. So I will personally recommend to people, given everything that I just said, okay, to rev match and heel toe. Now, can you take the benefit of some engine braking? Yes. I've actually tested this, and it will actually give a better braking balance to the car, especially if you're in a rear-wheel drive car, if you can rev match, because you're going to put a little bit more drag, a little bit more load on the rear tires now when you do that. I have found, for example, and I would encourage you to test this yourself if you have a rear-wheel drive car, is try to do maximum threshold braking from a big braking zone, braking from 125 miles an hour, get on the brakes, boom, wait a moment, heel toe to fourth, heel toe to third. If you do that properly, all right, and then try to apply the same braking force without downshifting the next time around, you're probably going to overdrive the front tires and encounter a little bit of ABS ice mode, or, if your tires can lock up with your fancy motorsport ABS system, that will occur because you're actually going to have a less balanced drivetrain with more. You're going to be asking more of the front tires without heel toe rev matching. Now, the caveat to that is if you have a modern advanced ABS system, right? I still run, I'm sorry to report, a stock E36 4-channel braking system. I don't have an MK60 on the car. Maybe I've had an MK60, it'd be different. It probably would. If you have an ABS system that can react and adjust to a little bit more load on the fronts and not rev matching and just allowing the revs to come down more quickly with less engine braking, less engine braking force on the rear tires, you might be able to take some gain from it, right? And you also take the benefit of not in that period of time when you're doing the heel toe, you are losing engine braking, and now you're upsetting the car, right? So what's faster? It might depend on the car. It might depend on the setup. I guess I would be a scientist and use my scientific default answer and say it might just depend. It might depend on the car. It might depend on the track, on the setup, on the tire, on the conditions. But let's say they're just equal, okay? I'm always an advocate of trying to keep the car in the power band at all times. And I think it is just good practice to keep the car in the right gear as you go down a gear and getting your brain used to it. What if you're in a battle situation and you go down a gear in a corner, or maybe you're in a battle and, maybe, right in the middle of a traffic situation where you're in your heel toe braking zone, but there's lap traffic, and maybe keeping your car in the optimal gear might be in that split second overtaking battle racecraft situation where you have a little bit more control over your car in the power band. And maybe that's enough to either defend or complete the overtake. I think it's just, let's use an aerospace term, or maybe this is just a general racing coaching term. I would say it's probably best practice to try to do heel toe and do it without the use of an auto blip, really use an analog heel toe where you're, however you want to do it, whether you're, using your pinky toe or you're transitioning your whole foot over, which is the way I do it with your heel to hit the throttle. I would offer that as BSF approved best practice, but it depends. So figure out what's best for you.
Okay. I know James Houghton says he does not. And I know Eric is on the auto blip life. So
yeah, I'm on the analog life. I'm on the old school blip. Hey, look, it looks really cool on videos. You can brag to all your friends.
I honestly, I suck at it. So I thought I had it figured out, and then I changed the gear set in my transmission, and it threw me for a loop. And I think I also changed my engine. So on the K24 revs so fast that with the clutch in, it'll bang the limiter with, what I think is almost no pedal pressure. Maybe I'm just stomping on it with my heel, right? But, I have to work on that threshold, that braking life that everybody knows. There's no hiding it. All the guys I race with know I'm weak on the brakes. So that fundamental needs to get fixed before I really start working on heel towing, because I don't want to be in panic when I go to heel toe and then smash the limiter all the time. So that's just me personally. So
yeah, well, so maybe this is a good time to just talk about a tertiary thing then too, which is mindset in the cockpit, right? So one thing I go over, it's number one with my students is just 3 deep breaths before you get in the cockpit, just, and then 2 more times afterward. And even doing it once helps you. And so why do I mention that now? Well, even myself, I find if I get a little bit excited in the cockpit, one of the things I'll start to make mistakes on is too much brake pressure input right off the hit. So if you can just stay focused and stay calm, and then let's break down what happens when you start to make mistakes on the brakes. Let's say you're using too much input. Well, you can learn if you're listening to the podcast right now, maybe just close your eyes where you're hitting the brake.
Not if you're driving.
Not if you're driving. Not if you're driving. Hopefully maybe you're listening to this on the couch, or maybe you're doing your auto maintenance in the garage or something. But okay, if you're driving to work or on your lunch break, don't close your eyes. But you just imagine for a second you're in the cockpit and it's a qualifying lap, or you're in a race situation, and you hit the brake. Think about what feedback you're getting from the pedal at that point. Is it just static, right? Because if it's just static feel, either it's a non-ABS car or it's an ABS car and there's no ABS involvement. If you have a fancy motorsport ABS system, then the ABS is already doing stuff and you're a big cheater and I'm jealous. But putting that aside, you will start to feel a little bit of pulsating. It's going to all be different, but you can actually feel, and I would encourage you to do this if you can. Do this experiment. Make sure no one's around you, right? But try to just go into a braking zone and just go right to a 10 pedal. So when I say 10 pedal, I mean a 10 out of 10 pedal. Right to a 10 pedal. Try to shock your front tires into ABS and then feel it. Treat it like a science experiment. Feel the pulsating coming back from the ABS pump, which is sensing that lockup. It's trying to cut pedal pressure. It's trying to cut hydraulic pressure to the caliper to allow that tire to start spinning again, and feel that pressure and catalog it. Just like we talked about with steering angle and the vibration or the audio input that is unique to that tire. Feel what your ABS pump is going to do. Learn to get intimate with your ABS pump. Or if it's a non-ABS car, learn to get intimate with what your tire is going to do when all of a sudden that steering wheel lightens up on you, because there's no more force coming through the tires and the wheel is going to go wherever it wants. And learn to feel those warning signs. It's cool because with some modern brake pedal setups in the simulator, I have a Fanatec Club Sport version 3, and it's wired to give like an ABS warning. And that's a great way to practice it at home. But learn to feel in your car the warning signs before ABS is about to fully engage, and make that part of your algorithm. And then you could actually learn. I swear you can learn this with enough practice to just practice just continuing to just creep forward on the pressure on your brake in the braking zone, just to the point where the ABS pump just starts to get ready to engage. And that is your maximum pedal pressure. You can learn that for every car. So add that to your experiment list the next time you get in the car. And then if it's a non-ABS car, you will start to feel the sliding coefficient of friction of the tire transition to the static coefficient of friction. And that is also a unique feeling. And catalog that pressure and then use that and incorporate that into your algorithm. Learn those two things. Learn how the car is going to talk to you. I hate to sound pedantic or trite if you've watched other people talk about this, but that is a real technique you can use.
Okay, so first off, I absolutely cheat with the sim rig. I have a digital stop built into my Sim Magic setup. So I never engage the ABS, and I'm always like 2 or 3% below engaging it. So no matter how hard I stomp on the pedal, I'm not in the ABS, because most of the cars that I drive, if they have ABS, it will absolutely be a disaster to get into it. But yeah, anyway, but on my car, my Civic, I cannot feel the ABS go off.
Okay.
And I switched to shoes, like the last generation F1 style shoe. Like they tell you don't walk in these shoes in the paddock because you won't have any shoe left after a year. I don't care, whatever. Like it's so thin, I still can't feel it. I cannot feel what that brake is doing, and that's probably why I'm so terrible at it. Or I'm too busy using my entire leg to brake instead of something else, right? Like I'm not doing 405 squats in the gym. I'm doing some finesse, but I'm doing 405 squats when I try to stop. So anyway, okay. You're kind of going to ruin the segment because we've talked a lot about it, but I'll get a concise answer when we get there. But okay.
Sure.
The more we concentrate on our analog movements in the cockpit and improve our analog skills, what are the bonuses that we're likely to see?
Fantastic question. The bonuses you're going to see are, instead of being able to go fast for just a lap or two, you're going to be able to go fast for a 30 or 40-minute race stint. You're going to see that you're going to take better care of the tires. The tires are going to wear less. Those 3 or 4 drivers that were keeping up with you in qualifying or the first 2 laps are going to slowly drift away. You're going to find that the fatigue mentally and physically is going to be less when your inputs are correct. You will require less physical energy to keep the tires at the optimal grip level and less mental energy to keep the car just on the limit of grip. It's going to open up more available RAM in your brain to start thinking about other things that are important in racing, like being conscious of the tires, being conscious of the track conditions, paying attention to other instruments in the car, paying attention to your racecraft. Let's say you are in a battle, you're attacking or defending. You're going to open up more brain power to focus in on the other parts of driving, of racing and competition that are also critical at the highest levels of competition, aside from your driving. All of those things are going to be made better.
Yeah, and when you have that bandwidth, when you have that mental clarity on track, you're infinitely safer. Infinitely safer. Because the awareness becomes easy. People red mist, right? I mean, we have the saying for a reason. When you're mentally clear, you are not going to red mist. You're going to go, okay, this person is weak in turn XYZ. I need to set him up to get in there, by that turn. How am I going to set him up? Where can I make up the ground? you're thinking out your chess strategy while you're looking around. Like you've cleared out all the stuff that you don't get locked in. You don't get locked in on your gauges, you don't get locked in on your competition, and you get to free think. And it really is a big deal when you're out there. So
it's a huge deal. So many things I could mention as you were eloquently saying that. So there's a couple things I want to say. Smart decisions and poise. So smart decisions. There's a phrase I keep taped on my dash to keep me humble. Doesn't matter if it's your first track day or your Max Verstappen. You should have a phrase to remind you to make smart decisions always. Smart decisions with your driving, smart decisions with your racecraft, smart decisions with driving safely. Safe being a relative term. I kind of get cringed at a little bit in our modern world. I feel like the word safe is overused, right? Because it's like, I'll say, here's a little bit of some insight. Maybe we're tangenting for 2 seconds. My philosophy on life is the purpose of life is not to be safe. The purpose of life is to live. Okay? So we're out here on a racetrack. Yes, sir. We are taking calculated risks. This is very difficult. This is a very difficult and awesome thing that we're doing right now. It's not for most people. It's a little scary. I still maintain a slight amount of healthy fear every time I strap into that cockpit. And that's a good thing. That's a good thing, to have a healthy respect for what we're doing out there. Okay, so that should hype us up just enough to get focused, but we don't get too distracted to where it inhibits our ability to stay poised and make smart decisions and perform at our best. So smart decisions is number one. So staying poised then, right? So to your second point, being a master of what you're doing out there and getting 100% out of your car, but more importantly, knowing that you're getting 100% out of your equipment, that is going to enable you to stay balanced, to stay focused, and to stay poised, and to keep your emotions in check, right? Because at the end of the day, you can only get 100% out of your car, okay? Max Verstappen isn't going to finish in the top 18 in an F1 race if he's driving an Aston Martin. I'm sorry to say. For all those Aston Martin fans out there, I think Max Verstappen is one of the best drivers in the world, probably in the history of planet Earth. He's incredible what he's done. And I think his driving record shows that, and his pace compared to his teammates shows that. Without going into a deep dive about that, right? But the car matters. All you can do is get 100% out of your platform. You prepare with your driving, with your setup, with your configuration under the rules, within your budget to the best of your ability. And life isn't fair, okay? Life isn't fair. So all you can do is your best. But if you get 100% out of your platform, what is that going to enable you to do when you're in a battle? You're going to know the limits of yourself. You're going to know the limits of your car. You're going to place a hard nose right up to the limit, but fair battle. You're going to respect the rules of engagement with your competitor, and you're going to have a fantastic battle. And win or lose, you're going to know that you respected the rules of engagement, you took calculated risks, and you have a great race. Whether it's win or lose, you got the most out of what you were capable of doing. So yes, so being a master, knowing that you're getting everything you can out of it, that helps you to stay focused and poised out there and to not red mist. And I think, in my humble opinion, it enables you to take the most enjoyment out of what we're doing out there. Because, not to get philosophical for a second, but it's like, how lucky are we all just to have the opportunity to get out there and do this? I mean, really, how cool is it that we live on planet Earth at this age, at this point in time in the expanding universe, to be able to race cars around planet Earth? That's awesome. And think about, if you're anything like me, how much time, energy, money, parts of your life you sacrifice to be able to do this, right? Don't you want to get the most out of it and enjoy the best experience you can with these other souls on planet Earth that are doing the same thing? To me, I think that's what it's all about. Over.
Yeah, and it starts with what we talked about, with the fundamentals, with that analog skill that we need to have. And if we have that, then we know that we're doing our best behind the wheel, with and giving our all, and it provides a comfort level. It provides us pure enjoyment as far as I'm concerned. If I know I'm doing everything I possibly can, then that's all I can do. And I can just hope that I have a great battle, right? Win, lose, draw, DNF. If I fight until the last lap in DNF, by all means, it's a DNF. It'll be the best DNF I ever have, as long as I was battling with my peers and my friends on track, right? That's what we're here to do. So awesome.
Yes, sir. It's almost like a metaphor for life. All you can do is play the hand that you've been dealt to the best of your ability, and fight until you got nothing left. And it's pretty darn easy to look at yourself in the mirror the next day, regardless of the result, if you can do that. So yeah,
I mean, winning feels great, right? But a close second, like a 1B, is having a great battle for position over and over, lap after lap, trading back and forth. I mean, when you get back, like, you just want to find that driver and talk to them and relive it as much as you can, right? Like, it's a great time. So
100%. Yeah, if you want to give me, if you don't mind, I'll give you just a couple of short stories to that end.
Sure.
So there's a scene in the movie The Matrix. If you're familiar with The Matrix, awesome set of movies. They made a trilogy about it, a trilogy with Keanu Reeves, and there's a part where he's learning how to operate in the Matrix, and he has some battles with Morpheus, and then I think not the keymaker, but there is a sort of guardian, a security guard who guards the Oracle, and he has to fight Neo before he's allowed access to the Oracle. And Keanu Reeves, Neo says, why did you fight me? He said, I had to be sure that you were Neo. And he said, you could have just asked. And he says, no, you do not truly know someone until you fight them. And so I would say, I will offer this to your viewers. Maybe think about this: is you are battling someone. You are having a fight. You are two warriors trying to fight with honor and respect. You're trying to kill each other. Not try to literally kill each other, but you are trying to win. You're trying to get the position. It's less about whether you win or lose than it is about how you fight and how you battle that driver. And you will know very quickly what someone is really all about going through a battle with them. And I'll give you two names that just come off the top of my head. The first one is Ronnie Vidoc. You may have heard of this guy. He raced in GLTC a couple of years, known from NASA, Honda Challenge guy, great driver, hard worker. And we met each other, had never met each other in our lives. And I pulled my car off the trailer from a 2-year break in 2021. Same thing with him, Lime Rock Park. We had an epic battle, nose to tail. I lost. I was trying to get by him. I was a little quicker. He defended well. And I went up and shook his hand after the race. Still one of the best battles that I've ever had. I still talk about it when people bring this topic up. Ronnie and I became very good friends. He came and bought a townhouse just down the road from me here in Wallingford, Connecticut. And we're still great friends. That's a relationship that I made. And then Eric Magnuson, one of the best drivers I've ever raced against in NASA. And we had another great battle recently at CMP as I was leading the points championship through race 2 after the win at CMP this year, and race 3. And my buddy EMAC turned it up a little bit and put on a couple of fresh tires. And I didn't bring an extra set of tires and was in front of him in race 3, but he slowly started to reel me in, and I defended hard. But he set me up last corner of the last lap at CMP race 3. And I had about a 1-car length lead exiting the final corner. But then here comes this LS3 V8, bah! And just got me at the line. And you know what? I said to myself in that moment, like, that was an awesome battle. And the battles I've had with that man are amazing. And I will remember that awesome battle for the rest of my life. And that's what it's really all about. So cheers.
All right. So I just want to make sure, you said you took notes. Did we cover everything you wanted to cover in your notes?
Well, I'll maybe add just a couple things, and if for tidbits, and if you want to ask me questions. So I'll just give two little tidbits. So
okay,
one thing is not driving the right line. I won't dive into this, but one of the biggest deltas in lap time is not placing your car on the rubbered in grip line. Now, that's a little bit different from analog driving technique, but all of the best analog technique is still not going to suffice if you're not placing the car properly where you need to. So focus on learning the proper line and using all of the racetrack. But having the proper analog technique is going to allow you to place the car where you want within millimeters consistently and using the entire racetrack. So add into your toolkit, your repertoire of skills. Are you really placing the car in the correct place everywhere? Are you taking curb where you need to? Are you not taking curb where you shouldn't be? Are you using all of the track at exit? Are you wasting unnecessary distance at turn-in? Are you driving in the grip line where you should be because everyone else is racing there, even if maybe that's not ideally where you're supposed to be? So keep that in mind. And then I wanna make just a small comment about driving in the rain, because people ask me this. So the Rainmeister, Michael Schumacher, okay, he used to say, when you're driving in the dry, the tires talk to you. When you're driving in the rain, they whisper. Well, I will add to that, because I'm not going to outdo one of the greatest drivers of all time by trying to give you advice on how to drive in the rain. Although I could maybe talk to you in more human terms to help you do better than Michael could, because Michael wasn't a coach. But we'll just put that aside for a second. But what I'll say is, if you were to ask me what the easiest technique it would be to try to tell a driver to do to get on the limit when driving in the rain, which I say is important because driving in the rain is scary, okay? If you've ever hydroplaned or lost control abruptly while racing or driving at the limit in the rain, it can be a little scary. Maybe you have an off, a small mistake, if you hydroplaned and make a miscalculation, could mean you end up in the wall. So what is a good fundamental technique to go as fast as possible, as quickly as possible, and to work yourself up to the limit in the rain? The answer is very simple. Make it understeer. Make it understeer. What does that mean? Well, what that means is do what you've got to do to get into the corner as fast as possible. But if you are under the limit and you find yourself under the limit, just add a little bit more throttle and a little bit more steering angle. Make it understeer. Use the attempt to achieve an understeer situation to see how quickly you can go through the corner, to see how quickly the tires will lose grip. Let that be your relatively low-risk science experiment to find the limit of the car and the limit of grip for those conditions in the rain. Make it understeer.
Yeah, that's smart. My podcast with Ross about wet weather stuff was he was trying to make the car do something early. So early in the corner, make it push, make it step out, do whatever you can to get the car to do something early. That way there's plenty of space left to work with it, right? So
yes, sir.
That was one of the things he did. But yes, making it understeer is absolutely the safest way to do it, right? So,
that's what I do. And I'd like to just add 5 more words so this gets immortalized onto the internet for all time.
Forever.
Okay, my identical twin brother, Joe Barbato, who was one of the greatest drivers I've ever seen, who has been retired for a while now. He's the one who gave me that advice a long time ago as I was preparing for rain driving at the SCCA Solo Nationals. And he said, Nick, make it understeer. And it worked out pretty good for me. So shout out to my brother, Joe.
Yeah. Maybe we'll have to get Joe on the podcast next.
Joe's been out of the game he's been out of the game for a while, but he's an interesting guy to talk to. He's a little bit off the grid these days, but maybe we can pull him out from under his rock.
That's fair. I'd be off the grid too if I didn't have a podcast to promote. So.
Amen to that.
So, all right, let's do the 2026 segment. So you have it in your car, but you're building a new race car from scratch or whatever. ABS or no ABS in your race car?
I mean, look, if you're trying to go as fast as possible, you got to run ABS. The fastest way around is some sort of motorsports ABS system, the MK60 motorsport ABS. There's others, your motorsport ABS du jour. You're just not going to be that type of braking performance. I'm sorry to say. You can get real darn close optimizing an ABS system, a non-ABS system, and you can play some more games easily with cockpit bias and stuff. But a motorsport ABS 100% for all-out racing.
Okay. So for those of us poor folks without Mark 60s and higher end motorsports ABS, if we have ABS in the car or just in general, what's the technique we should be using? You hinted at it earlier, but what's the technique we need to use on an ABS car while we're racing?
Treat it like a non-ABS car. Fundamentally approach your braking to being as aggressive as humanly possible without engaging the ABS system. The ABS system, typically, if it's anything like my ABS, and the more modern ABS systems in the late 90s, 2000s, some cars got really good. But if you're like me in a 1990s era stock ABS system, you're going to get a likelihood to get ice mode as it senses very quickly differential speeds of the wheels. The fastest way around is use a slightly lighter initial brake pedal pressure. We'll call it a 6 or a 7 out of 10. And then very quickly as possible, transition to an 8 or 9. Going to a full 10 is going to, at some point, lock up the brakes and not lock them, but engage an ice mode situation or an ABS situation, which is never going to be as good as just a threshold braking, minimal or either a non-invasive ABS situation or minimally invasive. That is always going to be faster with a crappy stock ABS system than allowing the ABS to intervene. Treat it like a non-ABS car. If you do have no ABS, it's similar. It's basically the same, except what you're going to do is you're going to be more at risk of lock, of course. So be more trained to quickly release pressure. But in either situation, train yourself to feel ABS pump engagement or train yourself to feel just the moment where that wheel gets light and the tire starts to transition from rolling coefficient to static coefficient. Learn those two intimate sensations and adapt accordingly.
All right. I'm collecting data from everybody. So at the end of the year, we're going to have some pie charts probably. So anyway,
all right.
Some basic pie charts, but Nick, it's been a pleasure, my man. Yeah, you're always welcome on. I know I'm going to have to twist your arm again. Don't worry. I won't be like Bill and harass you every couple of weeks to come on the podcast for a while. So
there's no twisting, man. No, this was great. Thanks so much, Cobb, for having me on. It was I had a blast doing this. It's an honor to be on your show. I love these podcasts. I think it's so great that the community has this stuff and guys like you out here doing this. So thanks for your time in doing this. It's so great, and look forward to listening to more.
Awesome, man. Thanks a lot.
Thanks, brother. Cheers.
Until next time, keep working on yourself, keep working on the car, and let's get faster.